Well, thanks for being here today. It is such an honor to get to be asked to speak here today. And I think the reason why I was given the title, The Startup Life, is because clearly Andy and I have our own personal lives really dialed in, truly exemplary personal lives. And so just to give you a quick example of this, recently, a couple weeks ago, Andy was taking our boys home after a long Sunday at church. They're walking to the car, everybody's exhausted, and my boys are complaining about how Andy always parks his car like in the furthest possible parking space. And so somebody's like, "Dad, why do you always have to park so far away?" And Andy thinks, "Oh, this is a great teachable moment. And I'm going to teach these kids about servanthood and how we offer the very best to our guests. And we're going to park a little bit further so they can have the best spaces." And so he launches into this teachable moment. And our 6-year-old looks up at him with just this look of pure disgust on his face. And is like, "Dad, we own this church." So clearly, we are doing some great teaching to our children, instilling wonderful values, and thus I get to teach about the startup life. No, actually, I think the reason why I'm qualified to teach about personal life is because Andy and I have been through the school of hard knocks, and we like to call it character school. And I think that we are always enrolled in some kind of class at character school and learning these lessons the hard way. And so what I've done today is I've put together 8, or actually 7, because 7's like the perfect number, right? I put together 7 principles that I feel like have been helpful for us. Another working title of this message could be what every church planting wife wishes that their husband knew. And so I know that in church planting, there can be this sense that a wife wants to be supportive. A wife wants to come alongside your dream and to help carry it with you. But there can be division in the home. And there can be a sense of a struggle there where the wife is not feeling as a part and involved and on board as she would want to be or as you would want her to be. And so these are just a few principles along the way that we have found helpful. So principle number 1 is this. Finances matter. I think a lot of times we go into church planting and we just receive the assumption that it's going to be hard for us personally. We're going to have to sacrifice financially. We're going to barely get by. We're going to barely make ends meet. And so we're going to have to take this hard hit financially. And it can create some real struggle in your finances in the home. And it creates a lot of stress. There is so much stress and uncertainty in church planting. And I'm here to say that personal finances does not need to be one of those. That, yeah, it's not going to be the time that you're stockpiling a bunch of wealth, probably. But also, we don't have to assume that God intends us to make this sacrifice that our wives go to the grocery store and then they can't even buy the food that our family needs that week. When you can provide for your family, when you can provide the finances that your family needs to live, then it frees up that part of your wife's heart to not have to worry and stress, but to be able to go all in with this vision that God is giving to your family. Whenever I meet a church planter, I always encourage them to do the hard work of finance raising and support raising on the beginning, because the tendency is to want to jump right into the ministry, that we get so excited about seeing lives changed and souls won to Jesus that we want to get like half of our support raised or half of our funding raised, and then we want to jump right in. But when we do that, we are short-selling ourselves on the ministry that God could do with all the funding if we had raised it. And also, we're creating an unnecessary amount of stress in our home life. You know, if you could look your wife in the eyes and say, no matter what happens over the next 3 years, if we are going to give it our all, we're going to pray with all of our hearts, we're going to do everything we can to see this church get off the ground. But no matter what happens, even if at the end of these 3 years, if we have to pack it all up and go back home, I will provide for you. There will be a salary. There will be food on our table. Then she can feel relaxed about that, and that's not going to be one of the stresses in your life. It's just an unnecessary stress. Finances matter. The second thing is to prioritize date night. Date night saved us in the early stages of this church plant. Even in the most busy times when we were having our first preview service or our grand opening, we would prioritize one night a week to have a date. And it was really great the way it worked out. We had another team family that had small children, and we would rotate babysitting for each other's kids so that each family could get a date night. And it was maybe the one time of the week that I knew I was going to have Andy's undivided attention, because he would be so busy and so just distracted with work. And sometimes we wouldn't have time to connect all week long. And I would literally come to date night sometimes with a list of things that we needed to talk through personally, because we just hadn't had a chance to connect on those things previously. But because I knew that I had that night coming, it created a sense of relief in me. Like, I didn't feel this pressure that I constantly had to be nagging him about these different personal things that we needed to talk through, because I knew a time was coming. It was a time that both Andy and I really looked forward to as just a chance to connect with each other and disconnect from all the stress that we were facing in the startup phase of our church life. And so I really encourage you to prioritize that time with your wife, to have a date at least once a week. I knew I had Andy's full and undivided attention, that he was there with me in that moment, and it created a lot of sanity in our lives. All right, number 3 is to include your wife in the vision, to share with her your heart and all of your ideas, even from the very beginning. I think that it adds so much value to your wife's role on your team when you include her in these ideas, when you ask for her feedback and you really listen to her. There is very rarely a decision, especially a major decision related to the church, that Andy doesn't run by me. And I love that. Some wives might not like that, but I love that, because what it says to me is that I have a valuable seat at the table and that he wants to hear my feedback. Now, Andy doesn't feel obligated to always take my suggestions, just like he doesn't feel obligated to take any of our staff suggestions all the time. But he, you think that's funny. It wasn't a joke, but he doesn't. So he doesn't feel obligated to take our suggestions, but you know what? He listens, and he definitely takes them into consideration, and sometimes he does. And he allows me to be a part of shaping the culture and the vision of South Bay. And you know what that does for me as a wife? Is it makes me want to step up my game. It makes me feel completely bought into the direction that we're headed as a church. And it makes me want to offer the very best advice, the most spirit-filled, biblically based, faith-believing advice that I can give to him. And it makes me feel like, you know what, I play a significant role here. And so it validates your wife's role, and it helps her to feel like, you know what, I play an important part. Now, some of you today may feel like every time you share an idea with your wife, she just pours cold water on it. And maybe, unfortunately, she is very critical of you and very critical of your ideas and dreams. And I would say that there are at least a couple of different scenarios that could be going on there. One is that it's just sin on her part, that maybe she just has a critical spirit, and that you as her husband need to lovingly encourage her to look at that and to help her to see how that's making you feel. But I think more often than that, there's an underlying root issue that's going on. And I think perhaps if every time you bring an idea to her about your church or some venture that you're taking on, and she criticizes it, I think what it reveals is that there's something in your leadership that she doesn't trust, that there's something that you're doing that has made her lose faith in you. And it could be the way that you handle finances. It could be the fact that you always come up with grandiose ideas, but you're not able to deliver on them. And so she finds herself picking apart your dreams, and it crushes your spirit, but she's feeling with a lot of fear on the inside. And so if that is the situation that you find yourself in, you find yourself holding back and not sharing your dreams and your ideas with your wife because she's so critical, I would encourage you to push through it and to figure out what is the root issue of that critical spirit. It might take some work, but it will be worth the effort, because you're going to feel the freedom to include her in the vision, and she's going to feel more a part of what you guys are doing. So the third thing is to include your wife in the vision. The fourth principle is to be a ravenous learner. Andy talked a lot about that this morning, just the tenacious teachability. And I got to tell you, that is one thing that I love the most about Andy Wood. If you know Andy, you know that he always has about 5 books that he's reading. He is never without a journal. He is always taking down notes. He will pound you with questions. He can learn from any conversation that he has ever in because he is hungry to learn and to grow. And for me as his wife, that makes me trust him, because even if Andy has some gaps in his leadership, or even if he doesn't know how to get to the next level, he is going to figure out who does, and he's going to get an appointment with them, because he is a ravenous learner. And so for you as your wife, or for your wife, as she's looking at your life and your leadership, there are definitely shortcomings in your leadership. There are for all of us. But when she looks at you and she knows that you are going to do whatever it takes to learn the skills to take you where you need to go, it allows her the freedom to say, you know what? I can trust him. I can trust that he's listening to God. I can trust that he's listening to a bunch of advisors, and he is going to figure this thing out. So be a ravenous learner. That's point number 4. Number 5 is this: to under-promise and over-deliver. One of the things that I love most about church planters is that you guys have these amazing dreams, just these faith-filled, the sky is the limit, God can do it kind of dreams. I love that about you. And you really believe that God can do it and that God can do it through you. I hope that you never lose that quality. Another great quality of church planters is that typically you are able to sell a really compelling vision and to bring people on board with this idea that you have, this dream that you have. But the combination of those 2 gifts can be a deadly combination, because what can happen is you can start selling people on these outrageous dreams, but they're not grounded in anything. And so you can overpromise and underdeliver, and that causes people to lose trust in you instead of to gain more and more respect and trust in your leadership. You know, you hear people like church planters say great things like, you know, we're going to have 20 campuses by the year 2020. And you're like, that's awesome, but do you have a plan for that? Like, where did you come up with that? And it's like we just pull numbers out of the air, like just, and you're like, okay, but we need a plan here. And one of our mentors, his name's Pastor Steve Stroop, has been probably the most helpful in helping us to understand what it looks like to be a visionary, but to be strategic and calculated with our vision. So, for example, when we were moving here and starting South Bay, and Andy was putting together the prospectus, you know, the tendency is just to kind of say, okay, God, what do you want to do here? How many people are we going to reach the first year? But Steve, our pastor mentor, said to us, no, don't just pull numbers out of the air. Do some research. Do some market analysis. Compare where you are planting to churches that have planted in similar areas, and to look at how did they grow and what were their finances like and how many people did they see come to faith in the first year, and make your projections based on research, just not on some number that you pull out of the air. And what that has done is it has enabled Andy to underpromise and to overdeliver. And all of our staff and me as his wife have so much faith when Andy makes a promise that he is going to deliver on that promise, and it helps us to grow in our trust of him. So number 5 is to underpromise and overdeliver. Number 6 is to make yourself respectable. And I realize that sounds kind of harsh, to make yourself respectable, but I got to tell you, we have come a long way in this. To understand the South Bay story, you really have to first understand the Texas story. Andy alluded to what our time was like there, but I got to tell you, we have come a long way from where we were when we were 21 years old, newly married, and 6 months later, we very naively thought that we could plant a church. And so we dove in, totally immature and unprepared for this. And Andy would be the first one to tell you, he told you this morning, that he was still learning what it looked like to be a husband, to be a man. And so there was a lot of things that were just amiss in our personal lives at that time. For example, he would have office hours in our home. Like, what does that mean? Like office hours? Like he's like checking his email. I'm like, what are you even doing right now? And then he would sleep in sometimes, and I'm like getting up early because I worked full time, and I was the breadwinner of the family, and he like got a part-time salary as like a church planter that he had like kind of raised some money for, and then he was like gaining weight and getting pudgy, and it was just like there were so many things that were just amiss, and I just had some disrespect growing in my heart. And you know what? I take ownership of that, because in the Bible, God commands wives to respect your husbands, and it doesn't have anything to do with whether or not your husband is respectable. But there is certainly some things that as a husband you can do to become more and more respectable. So I had this disrespect just brewing right underneath the surface in my heart. And one morning it just came bubbling out because I was up early on my way out the door to work, and Andy like rolls over in bed and he's like, "What? You're already going to work? Wow." And and I was like, I just said, "Yeah, one of us has to." And it was like such a low blow, and it revealed the disrespect that I had in my heart towards him. But let me tell you how different things are today. Today, Andy wakes up almost every single morning by 5:30 in the morning, and he is downstairs having a quiet time and reading the Bible. And he is working out, and he is investing in our children, and he's helping with bath time. And he is working hard, and he is working smart, and he is learning and growing and leading at a level I would put his integrity next to any man's. And I have the utmost respect for that man. And our staff has the utmost respect for that man and the way that he lives his personal life and the way that he leads our church with integrity. And it is no big deal. It is no hard thing for me to respect Andy Wood from the bottom of my heart, because he has made himself respectable. So that's point number 6, is to make yourself respectable. Point number 7 is this: be a servant at home. It is a joy for me to get to serve my family at home, to get to serve Andy at home. But it is a great help and a great motivation to me when he is also serving me. Rewind back to Texas for a few minutes. And when we were newly married, I just took it upon myself that I was supposed to be like the perfect little housewife, because that's who my mom always was. And so I thought that the wife was supposed to assume all of the household responsibilities. So Andy and I are both going to seminary full-time, and we're both working part-time. And I felt like it was my job to do all the laundry and to cook all the meals and to clean the house. And I just wanted to do everything. And you know what? Andy was happy to let me. He was like, "Yes, I got a wife." And the whole time I'm thinking, man, I need a wife too. And so one day I'm like, you know how when you're in seminary, you don't do the laundry until you're down to like your very last pair of underwear. And so I had all this laundry, probably like 6 or 8 loads of laundry and of course in seminary housing, you don't have a washer dryer. So I took all of our laundry to the laundromat. I wash it all, I dry it all, I fold it all, load it back up and come home, put my laundry away, left Andy's folded in the laundry basket. Andy gets home that night and he goes, "What, you didn't put my laundry away?" And I was like, "No, I'm sorry, I ran out of time." And then the next line's so good. The next line, he goes, "So next time, are you going to expect me to do my own laundry too?" Oh my gosh. So we had some growth, right? We needed to grow. Well, you guys, now when Andy comes home from work, he puts his computer in his bag, his phone is on the counter, and he is all in. From the time that he walks in that door to the time the children go to sleep at night, neither of us sit down. He is either playing with the children, he's giving baths, he's helping with dinner, he's washing the dishes, he's putting the kids to bed. Neither of us are going to sit down until all the children are in bed and until the house is put back in order. He is a servant at home. He never leaves a trail for me to pick up behind him. And I tell you what that does for me is it makes me want to serve him more. It's a self-propelling cycle of service that he serves me, and it makes me want to serve him, and that makes him want to serve me. And it is an energizing way to live instead of this defeating feeling that many wives have that you're just another kid, that she has to go around and pick up your dirty socks. And it's not an energizing way for her to live. So point number 7 is to be a servant at home. You know, there are probably some people here in this room today, and you have no idea the condition of your wife's heart. And you may know that something's a little off, there's something amiss, but you have no clue the depth of the wound that she carries. That happened to us. We were both traveling the same direction. We were both wanting the same things for our lives. We had the same goal, but we were flying at 2 completely different altitudes, and we were just missing each other. And I wanted to be that supportive wife, and I wanted to be excited about the ministry. And I'll tell you what, I loved God with all my heart, and I am passionate about the local church, but I felt like I was dying inside. I felt like Andy was just driving this car at 100 miles an hour, and I was barely holding on to a rope, just flopping along behind him. And every once in a while, he would look in the rearview mirror to make sure I was still back there. And it was not a good or a healthy way to live. I didn't want to be a naggy wife. I didn't want to complain and say no to him and throw cold water on his ideas, because it felt like I was saying no to God. But I was hurting. And there were some things that Andy was doing that was unknowingly causing me a lot of pain. The good news is that if that is you today, you don't have to stay there. Because today, Andy and I are serving together with a more unified vision for life and ministry than we ever have. This past year, due to some challenges that we faced on the home front as well as at South Bay, we have served together and lived together as a team more than any other time. The reality is, Andy and I have a lifelong commitment to each other and to this church. We're going to the grave here. And while I would like to think that at the end of this, that we would have the great privilege to have a handful of South Bay staff families that we got to live this life with and finish this race with, the truth is, any of them could leave at any time. The commitment level that Andy and I have to each other and to this church is different. And what I want to say to you is that your wife is your biggest advocate. Your wife is your most important team member, and she is the heart that you need to be most faithfully shepherding of anyone on your team. As I close today, I just want to say a prayer of blessing over you as you are church planters. May the wife of your youth capture your heart and satisfy you always. May God bless you with a unified vision and shared dreams. May the strength of your marriage and the fortitude of your home provide an undergirding stability to your ministry. May you be humble enough to repent of your failures as a spouse and seek a restored and fully redeemed relationship with your wife. May you always remember that you are better together. You're stronger together, and God can use your life more fully when you will stand hand in hand together.